For all of you that don't know me, which is probably most people watching this video, hi, my name is George, and I've decided to make this video because I ranted to far too many people about the Hunger Games that I've decided the internet needs to hear my opinions as well. If you've clicked on this video, there's a good chance you've either seen the movies or read the books, or probably both. And with the new movie coming out in November, I thought now is probably the best time to make this series. And it will be a series. I'm here to answer the question of what makes the Hunger Games so good? What is it about this story that was written in 2008 that keeps people coming back for more? The answer is nothing simple. I have managed to narrow it down to 4 easy to follow points. So this video is part 1 of a 4-part series where we'll focus on the first point. This is why the Hunger Games is better than you thought. This is my first time making a video like this, so if you're a diehard fan and you have any input or think I've missed something or have some advice, please drop a comment below because I would really appreciate that. And if you're interested in seeing the other 3 parts of this series, feel free to subscribe. I've already written 2 of the other video scripts so far. One of them's just being edited, the other one is pretty much done and dusted, so they should come out fairly quick. Yeah, so subscribe if you're interested in that. I'd also like to say that this is not going to be me recapping the series. I'm not going to be going through chapter by chapter, story beat by story beat. I am doing an in-depth analysis and overall appreciation for the Hunger Games, and that means everything and anything that's possibly related to it and can provide a richer, better understanding of the text and the context that surround everything in the story. Anyway, I'll just move on to my first point. And spoilers for both the books and the movies, of course. The Hunger Games, written by Suzanne Collins in 2008, is about Katniss Everdeen, a 16-year-old girl who is thrust into the focus of a secret rebellion after she volunteers to save her sister from a death match. Futuristic sci-fi world building, a relatable teenage protagonist, a romantic side plot, and dramatic stakes that grab you from the jump. The Hunger Games has all the hallmarks of a book of its genre. But what does that actually mean? The Hunger Games is categorized as YA dystopian, a subgenre of dystopian fiction, which came about in the late 1980s. Although The Hunger Games is arguably the most recognizable book in YA dystopian, it wasn't the first of its kind. That title is actually given to Lewis Lowry's The Giver from 1993. Which was also adapted for screen in 2014 following the success of the Hunger Games movie. In the years leading up to the release of the Hunger Games books came a few other books that fit into the YA dystopian genre, such as Scott Westerfeld's Uglies in 2005 and Stephenie Meyer's book, yes, that's Stephenie Meyer, The Host, which actually came out the same year as the Hunger Games, just a few months beforehand. And a quick PSA, I would just like to preface this by saying I mean no hate or any disrespect to any of the authors that I've already mentioned or the ones that I'm about to mention. Writing novels takes an extreme amount of time and planning and creativity and effort, and I don't want to diminish any of their hard work that these authors went through to create these stories, and I don't want to make anyone feel bad for enjoying these stories. These are simply just my thoughts and opinions. Following the success of The Hunger Games came a string of other books that fall into the same genre. Some very, very good, and some very clearly jumping on the bandwagon. Stories like The Maze Runner and Divergent came out in 2009 and 2011 respectively, and they also received the silver screen treatment, although their success was not as big as The Hunger Games, for varying reasons, which we will not go into. Which is why this video is all about, to understand the Hunger Games, we need to understand what genre it is. So sit with me for a brief history. The jump from adult dystopian to YA dystopian is less of a jump and more of a step, really. In a paper by Hayley Fowler, she identifies the differences between classical adult dystopian fiction and contemporary YA dystopian fiction. She identifies it by the narrative voice and language used to convey the intended message. Fowler's paper makes the argument that regardless of whether it being adult or YA, dystopian fiction carries the themes of freedom, morality, and hope. Dystopian fiction is a unique genre in literature. The predictions of the future, be that hopeful or bleak, are often rooted in the exaggerated observations that the author has made in the time that he was writing the story. This method of future as past writing is a part of the reason why novels like George Orwell's 1984 and Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 have stood the test of time. Much like how science fiction has, on occasion, retroactively predicted the future of science and technology, dystopian fiction has done the same for social, governmental, and ethical behaviors. The genre of dystopian fiction lends itself to a deeper exploration of complex themes and ideas, regardless of if it's categorized as classical, adult, or contemporary YA. The YA fiction genre as a whole has been tricky for literary scholars to define. Much like dystopian fiction, the genre is still fairly new, at least in name. Although fiction for teens has been around for ages, the title of young adult or YA fiction came about in the late 1980s. There are many famous works that are classed as YA fiction now that would have been categorized differently when they first were published. Lord of the Flies and Catcher in the Rye are two good examples of this, with Lord of the Flies originally being categorized as allegorical fiction, and Catcher in the Rye was originally categorized as realistic fiction, which is kind of insane if you've ever read either of those books, because they feel so particularly YA in just everything about them, especially Catcher in the Rye. The defining characteristics of the YA fiction genre is a young protagonist that must solve a problem that was thrust upon them by the adult world. There is a constant question, both internal and external, that the protagonist must answer. Who am I, and what am I going to do about it? Often in fiction, you'll find that a story adheres to the monomyth, or the hero's journey. YA stories are no exception. You may already be familiar with the framework of the hero's journey, but I'm gonna recap it for you guys real quick because it's just good to be on the same page, and some people may not even know what it is. Originally, there are 17 steps, so I am simplifying it. So first starts with the call to action. The hero has an inciting incident and the plot has kicked off. Then it is the refusal of the call. Something happens that makes them hesitate before they join in. Then there's the meeting of the mentors, the crossing the threshold. That is when they have someone guiding them through, and usually they're the person to kick off their initiative into the plot, really. Then there's the challenges, the allies and enemies, the culmination, the abyss. That's usually when the protagonist has reached the lowest point in their journey. Then there's the reward, the refusal of return, the final battle, and then return home. So just going through those things, you can already see where the Hunger Games fits into it. However, the hero's journey is not a template for writing fiction, but it is a helpful structure for writers. In the case of YA fiction, the steps of the hero's journey can be seen in the protagonist's journey into adulthood. The exploration of the protagonist's identity is a core part of the narrative, with everything else serving as a vehicle for the character to grow or regress from. Characters and tropes of YA are written for the purpose of identity search. The protagonist is a teenager, as is the intended reader, and so they will meet people or have experiences that relate to, or sometimes completely parallel, ones that are often found in the transition from childhood to adulthood. When YA fiction blends with dystopian, the themes come together to represent the unique and yet universal experience of growing up in the world around you. As a teenager, everything feels like a massive deal, and don't get me wrong, there are times where it is, but ultimately the feelings and emotions a person has are at the highest and most difficult to control during this time. YA dystopian fiction is unique in that it conveys those heightened emotions and justifies them by connecting them to an equally heightened world. It looks at the reader and says, yes, the way you feel is right. It's okay to be enraged at the world around you. Now, how are you going to change it? So I bring all this up to say that YA dystopian fiction isn't all just stories of teenagers rebelling and hot guys and evil government is evil just because. It's a genre that has a rich history and portrays an essential part of growing up that isn't always taken seriously. The Hunger Games is a masterfully written series that really utilizes the depth that dystopian and YA fiction has to offer. From the very first chapter of The Hunger Games, we learn everything that's important about Katniss. We learn that her sister is the most important person in her life. We learn that her mum is checked out and that her dad is dead. We learn about her daily routine. We learn about her friendship with Gale. We learn about the social and wealth disparity within her district. And we even learn about the games. All of this we learn in the first chapter, before the plot is kicked off, before most of the characters have been introduced. Suzanne Collins uses the first chapter to set up some of the themes that would carry through the series: wealth and class division, social inequality, propaganda and media manipulation, identity and trauma, just to name a few. An excellent example of a scene portraying and setting up some of these themes in the first chapter is when Katniss and Gale are selling strawberries to Madge's father, the mayor. For those of you who are movie-only people or who have never engaged anything about the series and are just here for vibes, after their morning hunts, Katniss and Gale go around the town to some of the merchants as well as the Hob, the black market area, to sell the spoils. One person they sell to is the mayor, and his daughter, Madge Undersea, is a friend of Katniss's. During this section, Katniss notices that Madge is wearing a beautiful and expensive looking dress. Gale makes a comment about this dress, to which Madge says, "Well, if I end up going to the capital, I want to look nice, don't I?" This causes Gale to become enraged, and Katniss explains to the reader about the lottery system, which is a system that lets kids put their names in more times for tesserae. Tesserae is a year's worth of rations. And those extra entries actually carry over every year. So for people in Katniss and Gale's position, where they are taking out an extra entry maybe once a month, possibly even more, because of their families. So for Katniss, she'd be doing 3. For Gale, it'd be probably 6 or 7. He's got a lot of siblings. Their entries, their chances look a lot different to someone like Madge, who wouldn't need to put her name in more times because her father is the mayor. Katniss highlights the unfairness of her and Gale's situation compared to Madge's, but she also notes that Gale knows that his anger at Madge is misdirected. This short conversation not only establishes the systemic oppression within the world of Panem, but also the class conflict within the district itself and within individual characters. Collins is an expert at using her characters to embody themes and ideologies with a complexity that asks the reader to look more deeply. Every time I reread The Hunger Games, I find something new. I get something new to take out of it. And I think that that is a testament to the absolute amount of depth that she has put into the series. We have to talk about the love triangle. Specifically about how there really isn't one. If you're a movie-only person, you may be a tad confused by what I've just said, but I don't blame you. While I adore the movies, I think that they are brilliant adaptations. Everyone really needs to see. I'm obsessed with them. I've rewatched them countless times. They are not without their flaws. They have added new scenes that didn't exist. Sometimes it's great, and they've removed several characters, cough, cough, Madge, Undersea, cough. The movies present a biased and singular perspective of the story that is different from what the average reader will get away from these books. Mainly being that the directors have been adult men, and I think the target demographic for these books, like I've said before, are children. Teenagers, specifically. They're gonna get a different take from it. But across the original 3 novels, not talking about the prequels, Katniss is torn between choosing Peter, her ally, and Gale, her childhood best friend. On the surface, this might come across as another typical YA love triangle, but ultimately the choice Katniss has to make isn't about which boy she's gonna end up with. It's about the ideology these boys represent. And I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. In an interview with David Leviathan, one of the editors of the Hunger Games series, for the 10-year anniversary of the books, Collins addressed the love triangle saying, Katniss isn't just deciding on a partner, she's figuring out her worldview. So let's start with Gale, just to get it over with. Gale Hawthorne represents war, struggle, justified anger, nostalgia, and retribution. Although many people in the fandom love to hate on Gale, he is the Prim Reaper after all. It's important to remember that this character is 18 years old, and he has grown up in nearly identical circumstances to Katniss. Both of their fathers died in the same mining accident, which led to them becoming the main provider for their families. I actually did develop a little bit of a soft spot for Gale. So let's start with Gale, just to Get it over with. I used to be #1 Gale hater. Gale supporters used to hate to see me coming. But in doing this little bit of an in-depth analysis into his character and rereading the books for like the 90th time, I feel I've only really truly started to understand who he is. Suzanne Collins never outright gives an explanation for why Katniss is empathetic in impossible circumstances, whereas Gale is not. But there are some context clues we can use to fill in that blank. The first being that when their fathers died, Katniss wasn't old enough to put her name in more times for Tesserae, and Gale was. Gale is 2 years older than Katniss in the first book, so when their fathers die, Gale is able to go straight into getting Tesserae, while Katniss is stuck with a catatonic mother and no way to make money. It is during this time before they meet each other that I believe Katniss develops her worldview, not solely from her father's influence, but through a stranger's act of kindness. Something that Gale doesn't get. He doesn't get a chance to have someone give him something without expecting something in return. Even his friendship with Katniss is built on mutual exchange. When they first meet, Katniss asks if he can teach her how to make a snare, and Gale agrees on the fact that she should get him a bow. From there, they learn from each other and gradually become a unit, but the foundation is always exchange. Although Katniss notes in chapter 2 that she knows Gale will take care of her mother and Prim, that knowledge comes from the fact that they made a pact to do so if either of them were reaped. And again, we the readers know that even if that pact had never been made, Gale and Katniss would probably have done that anyway. But from a reader's perspective, which is Katniss's unreliable and limited narration, we can gather that Gale's worldview comes from a place of extreme hurt. He is passionate but short-sighted, and he's intelligent enough to know that the system is wrong, but he also is aware that he has no power or is in any position to make some change, which is something that builds a lot of anger and resentment in him across the series, something that Katniss is reluctant to accept and understand. And we'll touch more on that in a moment. But for now, let's have a look at Peter. Peter Millark represents hope, peace, identity, compassion, strength, protection, and resilience. Peter is first introduced to the reader as the boy tribute reaped alongside Katniss. In the book, upon hearing his name being called out, Katniss thinks this. Oh no, I think. Not him, because I recognize this name, although I've never directly spoken to its owner. No, the odds are not in my favor today. We quickly learned that after Katniss's father died, a few months before her 12th birthday, she was on the verge of starving to death. In an act of desperation, Katniss goes rummaging through the bins outside the bakery and is scared off by Peter's mother. She goes to sit down under a tree in his backyard, waiting to die, just giving up, deciding that the next moment she's going to take Prim to the Peacekeepers and they're going to go to what is essentially an orphanage. While she's sitting there, Peter Millark comes out carrying 2 large burnt loaves of bread and a red welt across his face. He tosses one of the loaves to the pigs and the other one to her, and then rushes back inside. The next day at school, Katniss sees him staring at her. She's embarrassed, so she looks away and sees a dandelion. And that dandelion reminds her of the meadow that her father used to take her. The same meadow that Katniss enters every morning to hunt game and forage for food. This moment is why Peter is often referred to by Katniss as the boy with the bread. This was that stranger's act of kindness I mentioned in Gale's section. And I cannot stress enough how important this moment is. It is the introduction for Peter's character and highlights just how significant he will be throughout the rest of the series. In chapter 2, after telling the reader about this story, Katniss says this: "To this day, I can never shake the connection between this boy, Peter Millark, the bread that gave me hope, and the dandelion that reminded me that I was not doomed." From the very first moment we meet him, Peter represents hope. Throughout the first book, Peter's actions are seemingly ambiguous. Katniss doesn't know whether she can trust him or if he's simply putting on an act. However, as their friendship grows throughout the series, we see Katniss leaning on Peter or looking to him for examples of goodness in the world. In Catching Fire, Peter comforts Katniss every night throughout horrific nightmares. When Katniss is listing all the qualities that a rebellion leader should have, ones that she lacks, she thinks of Peter and how people don't just listen to him but embrace everything he says. And when Katniss is put on bed rest after hurting her ankle, jumping out of a tree over the electric fence surrounding District 12, Peter is there every day, helping her move around the house and sketching plants for her in her family's edible and medicinal guidebook. Throughout the main series, Katniss is continually associating Peter with moments of peace and hope, whether that's hope for the rebellion or an afternoon free from anxious thoughts. Peter is who she looks to when she feels hopeless. And while Katniss's relationship with the boys is presented through a romantic potential, that is hardly the reason Collins wrote them as she did. Team Gale versus Team Peter. If you were to look at online discourse now, you'd find an overwhelming majority for Team Peter, and rightly so. However, if you were to look at online discourse from 2012, when the movie was released, you'd find it was more of a 50-50 split. And with the casting of Liam Hemsworth and the release of Breaking Dawn Part 2, it seemed that the changes to the film gave the impression that The Hunger Games was a story more focused on the love triangle, with both boys being presented as equal love interests, which is only kind of true. See, from the beginning of the series, neither boy is set up to be a love interest for Katniss, at least in her eyes. With Gale, Katniss describes feeling comfortable around him, but doubles down on the fact that there is nothing romantic between them. And with Peter, Katniss shoots down any suggestion of interest the second it is brought up.
Because she came here with me.
So yes, in the first book, despite the fake dating trope being in full effect, there is still the argument that The Hunger Games doesn't have a romantic side plot, at least for the first book. The next two are a whole nother thing. For now, the first book uses these two male characters to set up potential paths that Katniss could go down. Will she give in to anger and frustration and the comfort of the familiarity her old life brought her? Or will she hold on to hope and maintain her identity and look for good and a future in the impossible? Will she be with Gale or Peter, fear or hope? That is the real choice Katniss has to make. And that is why the love triangle stands out from all the other YA dystopian books out there. As a protagonist, Katniss Everdeen stands out to me among the others in the YA dystopian genre. Not just because she's my favorite character in the series, but because of her ending. Katniss settling down with Peter and having children was something that shocked me as a kid. I remember the Not Like Other Girls movement of feminism in the 2010s being everywhere. Movies, TV shows, music videos, comics, books, plays. You couldn't escape it. And somewhere along the way, Katniss, with her interest in hunting and minimal female friends, got mixed in with that narrative. In the realm of YA fiction, especially when it came to the movies, it wasn't hard to find people comparing Katniss to other YA heroines. In the 2010s, Twilight was everyone's favorite punching bag. Bella Swan was the titular, not like other girls girl. Media was constantly pushing the idea that the girl who didn't like makeup or fashion, that didn't have many girlfriends, that didn't like shopping or talking about boys, that ate burgers over salads, that was into video games or skateboarding or cars, that kind of girl was the ideal girl. This idea hasn't really exited out of public consciousness either. Yes, we've done better at not demonizing feminine or girly traits in women, but the evolution of the not like other girls girl is the pick-me. And I'd argue that in our quest to counteract the hate towards the girly girl has resulted in a flipped dynamic that actually hasn't changed the way that women are viewed. It used to be girly girl bad and tomboy good, but now it's girly girl good and pick-me bad. Now, I know that the term pick-me was originally coined as a call-out of women that centered men in their lives at the expense of themselves and other women. But that label, along with everything else on social media, has been flanderized and applied to any woman that doesn't 100% support everything that every woman ever has done, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Being a pick-me or being not a girl's girl has continued to uphold the idea of what the right kind of woman to be is. And there's a lot of nuance to how and why those perceptions exist, but I think ultimately the fact that they exist at all means that we haven't really learned anything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How does Katniss Everdeen, the fictional character, factor into the cultural mindset of real-world women? Let's explore that, because much like everything else in this video, it's not that simple. The key traits of a character being not like other girls are having only male friends, caring little about her appearance while being conventionally attractive, being a good fighter, or having a typically masculine skill or trade, like fixing cars. There's a few others, but I think you're kind of getting the picture. Now, at first glance, Katniss does seem to have some of those not like other girls' traits. But does she really? In the movies, Katniss is surrounded by men. Her friendships with women are almost entirely cut out. I mentioned Madge Undersea earlier, but her friendship with Katniss, despite not being very prominent in the books, it still goes much deeper than her being someone Katniss sells game and strawberries to. Katniss describes her friendship with Madge at first as not being a friendship at all, really, but then explains how they sit together at lunch every day at school and they always partner for projects together. And when Katniss is saying goodbye to her family and Gale before going into the games for the first time, Madge goes to see her off and gives her the Mockingjay pin that belonged to her aunt, who had also been in the games previously. Madge kisses Katniss's cheek before leaving, and Katniss realizes that her friendship does run deeper than she gave it credit for. In Catching Fire, Katniss and Madge actually do start spending more time together after her first games. Katniss teaches Madge how to shoot while they're in the woods, and Madge tried teaching Katniss how to play the piano, albeit unsuccessfully. New recording day, new outfit. Katniss's friendship with Joanna Mason, as well as complete parts and aspects of Joanna's character, was kind of completely cut from the movies. In the movie version of Catching Fire, Joanna is extremely aggressive and hostile and kind of looks down on Katniss in a way. And honestly, don't blame her. She's openly angry about being back into the games.
I'm angry.
She's cursing out the game makers. She is yelling at Snow in the arena.
What if we set your backyard on fire?
And presents this bitter facade to the people around her. Movie Joanna is similar to her book counterpart, but there are quite a few things that are different, and a lot of those things stem from the fact that a lot of her stuff was removed. When the two first meet in Catching Fire, it is still in the elevator after the tribute parade. She does not strip off in the books. I kind of understand why they did that, still feel like it was not necessary. In the book, as far as Katniss knows all about Joanna, she knows that she won her games by pretending to be weak and confused and sad and depressed and crying a lot, and then waited until a few people were left and went on a killing spree and shocked everybody. And this right away sets Joanna up as being somebody that is extremely calculating and knows how to play her cards right. The first bit of dialogue we get from Joanna in the books is her complaining about her outfit for the tribute parade, and she's complimenting Katniss's outfit and wishing that she'd had Cinna as her stylist instead. And Katniss takes this to mean girl talk, something that she says she struggles with. And so she lies about this clothing line that she and Cinna, when really it's just Cinna, has been working on to get through the conversation. I bring this up because I think this line in particular is something that a lot of people latched onto as a part of the Katniss, not like other girls narrative that was going around. Katniss isn't good at talking to people about makeup and fashion and that kind of stuff, and she says that she doesn't have an interest in it, and she kind of doesn't, but at the same time I think she kind of does. So just hear me out on this. Suzanne Collins doesn't include anything in those books that Katniss doesn't know, perceive, or take an interest in. We're getting her singular perspective. So everything that Katniss knows, we know, and everything that Katniss doesn't know, we don't know. So Katniss taking an interest or just taking notice of all the makeup, hair, wardrobe, everything like that from the capital citizens and the people of District 12, not only is it needed just as a baseline for the story to understand what the world looks like, but it does give an insight into who Katniss is, because she's taking notice of something has caught her interest. Although she probably doesn't have an active interest, I'd argue that she does have a passive interest in those things. Maybe not something she knows how to translate into a conversation, but it is certainly something that she takes in mind. And honestly, I don't blame her, because for a character like Katniss, someone that hasn't had the luxury of exploring her interests and figuring out what she likes and what she doesn't like, it makes sense that she finds something frivolous like fashion and makeup. Her priority has always been survival. Everything else would just be a waste of time. Going back to my original point, Katniss's interactions with Joanna in Catching Fire are minimal, but they're telling. There are small moments that provide a foundation for that friendship that grows in Mockingjay, and Mockingjay really is the book where Joanna Mason shines the most. If you haven't read it, or you haven't read it for a long time, I would definitely encourage you to go read it, because her friendship, the friendship they build, is really, really sweet, actually. And I go into it in a little bit in a second. But that friendship provides a lot of context and insight into the choices that Katniss goes on to make further in the series, particularly when it comes to how she's voting in the end of the book when Coin is proposing a symbolic Hunger Games. It's not entirely based on a friendship with Joanna, but I do think it has a role. It serves a purpose of why she's gotten to that decision. There are small moments throughout Catching Fire in particular that I think do well to set this foundation for why these two end up becoming good friends and why they work so well together. There are moments like Joanna's fixing Katniss's pearl necklace just before her interview, and she tells her to make Snow pay for making her wear a wedding dress. There are moments like she specifically being the one to get Wyrus and Beatty safe in the arena, and moments like her confirming Peter's thoughts to Katniss about the Jabberjays in the arena and how they're only mimicking Prim's voice, and stating that Prim is so beloved by the Capitol, it would be insane for them to kill her or torture her. People like her too much, and she's doing this to comfort Katniss. We know all of this is because of her role in the rebellion, but I do think that there is more to it. And I'm going to put this up on the screen just to confirm it, but I remember reading that Suzanne Collins said that Joanna was 21 years old at the time of Catching Fire. She's one of the youngest victors besides Katniss and Peter, making her 4 years older than Katniss at that book. So Katniss is 17 in this one. That is the same age gap between Katniss and Prim. And I think that that is a bit intentional. I think that that says something. Joanna is extremely young, and she's watching someone who was essentially in her shoes a few years ago go through something horrific and traumatic. I think that there is something more there. In Mockingjay, Katniss advocates for Joanna to be rescued and pardoned when she's making her demands to the rebel leaders. She also does so for Annie, and surprisingly Inabaria, someone she notes she doesn't particularly like and is a little bit scared of, but she feels bad for leaving her out. And when Katniss is hospitalized after being shot in District 2 later on in the book, she finds herself sharing a hospital room with Joanna. And Joanna quickly makes herself very at home in Katniss's bed and tells her about how she's been borrowing her morphling supply and that she knew she wouldn't mind. In that same conversation, Joanna actually reveals why she has a bit of a hatred for Katniss, and it stems from jealousy. It's everyone's job to keep you alive. Katniss shares that she thinks Joanna's way with words would have made her a better Mockingjay, but Joanna dismisses this, saying that people don't particularly like her. The friendship evolves more in chapter 17, when Katniss actually encourages Joanna to train with her after they've both been told that they are in no condition to join the fight. The two girls spend the whole chapter just pushing each other to go on. When Joanna is going through morphling withdrawals, Katniss is right there for her, taking the verbal abuse and encouraging her to keep going and cutting off her supply. And when Katniss's bruised ribs convince her that she actually can't go on in the training, Joanna is the one to step up and say that they're both victors and they can survive anything that's thrown at them. About halfway through the chapter, Joanna is attempting to move out of the hospital. She feels very contained and feels like she's going crazy just in these sterile walls. But she's not allowed to leave because the hospital staff don't trust her on her own. So Katniss, without prompt, just volunteers to move in with her. And so they do. They're roommates for a while. And although Katniss never admits that she and Joanna are friends, that friendship is extremely real. It's fleshed out, it's developed, and has growth. Both girls have flaws and can be read as not like other girls, but I think that that reading is contradictory to the way that their relationship actually grows and evolves. I could go on and on and on about Katniss and Joanna's friendship, but I need to get back to my initial point, which is Katniss's ending. I mentioned before that Katniss's ending makes her stand out, to me at least, from other YA and YA dystopian protagonists. And that's because her choice of settling down with Peter and having children, and this is just my opinion, if it was written by any other person or in any other time, it would be extremely inauthentic because I don't think they would have taken the time to put that nuance in. The depiction of women in media, and let's be honest, women in general, is extremely narrow. The idea of motherhood is a complex and sensitive thing. In the 1950s and 60s, second wave feminism called for women to be valued in the workplace and us outside of just this view of being simply a wife and mother. Women fought to be taken seriously and to be respected in their choice to pursue a career. And I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the women that came before me because I am who I am because of them. My education, my fashion, my interests, my opportunities, I owe it all to them. That being said, feminism, much like everything else that is created by people, was and is flawed. Early waves of feminism were primarily focused on the liberation of white women, and with feminism in the 2010s was all about girl boss and strong female characters. Girl boss feminism encouraged women to pursue success and fulfillment in the workplace and push for higher positions in companies, which isn't a bad thing, but it also failed to identify that girl boss feminism is extremely individualistic in that it's asking for an extra seat at the table instead of demanding the system to be changed entirely. It's focused on the individual woman's success while actively harming the opportunities for women as a whole. It encouraged women to fight amongst themselves and compete with each other for opportunities and not demand more paths or create more paths and places for women. Which brings me to the strong female character conversation. Not like other girls and girl boss feminism are the foundational texts upon which the strong female character was born. Both ideologies stem from the individualistic mindset of what a successful and aspirational woman must look like. And what that looks like is a rejection of traditional femininity. In girl boss feminism, if a woman settles down and has a family rather than pursuing a career, she cannot be a feminist, and is actually giving into patriarchy by doing so. However, the reason feminism exists in the first place is to give women choice. The decision to chase a career or to be a homemaker is rooted in feminism because it is a choice. Now, I'm not saying that being a trad wife is the be-all, end-all, and ultimate goal for women. In fact, I think that the discussion of trad wives is long overdue, but that's not what we're talking about today. But for someone in Katniss's position, someone who has never had the ability or the opportunity to choose what she wants in life, the decision she makes to settle down and have kids is a feminist one. It's a testament to how safe she has helped make the world of Panem and how safe she feels. She feels security. She's not in survival mode. In the beginning of the series, Katniss's decision to not have children is rooted in the fact that she would have to risk losing them to the Capitol. In her mind, it would be worse to lose them than to never have them at all. And she's already living that fear through Prim. Throughout the series, Katniss acts as the mother she never got to Prim. In the first chapter of the book, when Gale says that they could run away and be free, Katniss says they have too many kids to take care of. And she's talking about Prim as well as Gale's siblings, but she's also including their mothers in this fact. She follows up her comment by saying she would never have kids, and Gale responds by saying that he would if he didn't live there. And Katniss's only response to that is, but you do. What we can take away from this conversation is that Katniss would never have kids because she could never consider living somewhere that provided her that level of safety and stability. When Prim's name is called at the reaping, Katniss's worst fear is realized, but being 16 years old, she's in a position to be able to do something about it where her mother can't. Even before the beginning of the series, Katniss would know that her mother would be unable to save her or her sister from the reaping simply because she cannot go into the games. She is too old, and she would know that if she were to have kids someday, she would be just as powerless. That is why, by the end of Mockingjay, when she says it took her 15 or so years to agree to have children, it carries weight. Even years after the war, when the games are nothing but facts in history books, Katniss still carries that fear of having the people she loves just ripped away from her. Her choice to have children wasn't something Peter pressured her into, and we know enough about his character to know that's not something he would ever do. Her choice came from wanting them herself. Katniss has been a mother since the very first page of the book, and while I'm sure Peter's desire for them would have been a factor in her decisions, it would not be the deciding factor. Katniss helped free the people of Panem and gave them an ability to choose. Why is it so controversial for her to do the same? It shouldn't be, but it was, at least until recently. I've seen quite a few takes from a few different people online, people like Leftie and Rachel Ramras, discussing this particular bit of misunderstanding. Those two in particular do an amazing job of stressing the importance of this choice. And if you want to check them out, I'll leave their channels in the description below. In terms of how YA protagonists are viewed in the cultural mindset, I feel very protective of Katniss. It's easy to read the series at a surface level and come away a bit confused on why her story ends the way it does. But those books aren't meant to be read at a surface level. Honestly, most books aren't. The kind of depth that Collins put into her series can be felt across every facet of her books. And Katniss is just one excellent example of that depth. Now, the love triangle and Katniss as a protagonist aren't the only distinguishing points of depth in the series. What sets The Hunger Games apart from others is the care that Collins takes when crafting secondary characters. Those characters are the ones that help flesh out the world building of Panem and the themes. She does so in a way that ensures that we, the reader, know that in the world of Panem, much like our own world, the line between good guy and bad guy is blurred, if it even exists at all. There are a few examples of this that really work to explore the themes that Collins is trying to convey. In the movies, Effie and Cinna take the place of Katniss's prep team, but in the books, it's quite different. In the first book, Katniss meets Vinia, Flavius, and Octavia, 3 capitalites that work for the games as part of her prep team. They're her stylists. Her first impression of them is that they're idiots, but she thinks that they're genuinely trying to help her chances and finds them a bit hard to hate. We don't get much more of them until after the games, when Katniss is being prepped for her heartfelt televised reunion with Peter. Her prep team is thrilled to see her, and Katniss admits she's happy to see them too, but likens it more to seeing a pet rather than people she actually cares about. We don't see them again until Catching Fire, when Katniss is being prepped for her pre-victory tour interview with Caesar. While getting her makeup and nails done, Katniss' mother enters and explains that Cinna has asked her to show the prep team how she did her hair for Reaping Day. And all 3 respond so enthusiastically and respectfully that Katniss actually feels bad for her behavior around them. She even considers how she might have been and what regrets she might have had if she'd been born in the capital. The next significant moment with them is at the end of the victory tour at a party in the president's mansion. We've all seen the movie scene, and it goes pretty straightforward. Those characters actually are supposed to be Flavius, Vinia, and Octavia. Katniss and Peter have been eating everything that they can at the party and are approached by her prep team. Octavia comments about them not eating, and they explain how they're full. Flavius leads them over to a drink table, and the prep team explain how the drink will make them sick so they can go on tasting everything. Katniss and Peter then excuse themselves for a dance, and Peter begins to vent to her. You go along thinking you can deal with it, thinking maybe they're not so bad, and then he cuts himself off. While Peter says this, Katniss is thinking about the starvation and the stretching of food she's witnessed in Gale's house, as his family is much larger than hers, and wonders what it must be like for others in her district that aren't able to hunt or sell or do the things that she and Gale can do. When she responds to Peter, she says that this drink is really nothing compared to forcing kids into the games, and her response to him isn't meant to be dismissive, but it's likely just to remind him of where and how at risk they actually are. At this point, Peter knows that Snow visited Katniss and knows that he doesn't believe their love story. So they can't really be saying and having these conversations, especially where they are. The next time we meet the prep team is after the reaping. Katniss is shocked to find that they are absolutely devastated that she will be going back into the games, and recalls Peter telling her about a train attendant that was also unhappy about the victors going back in. This is the first time we know for sure, that Katniss knows for sure, that the Capitol, or at least some people in the Capitol, are on the exact same page as the districts about the games. The next time the prep team show up in Catching Fire is as they're preparing Katniss for her final interview with Caesar. Upon seeing her and Peter together, he had comforted her through another nightmare, and so the prep team see them literally waking up in bed together. Octavia bursts into tears, which prompts Vyncke to remind her of an order that Cinna gave them, and Octavia leaves the room. And while doing her hair, Flavius starts crying as well, so Vyncke gives him a look and he leaves the room too. Vyncke remains and just avoids eye contact, and then Cinna comes in and dismisses her. But before she leaves, Vyncke takes Katniss's hands and looks her straight in the eyes and says this: "We would all like you to know what a privilege it has been to make you look your best." Katniss is deeply moved and hurt by the prep team's goodbye, but any lingering thoughts she might have had are quickly brushed aside as Cinna is showing her her wedding dress. Catching Fire is the first time we really get to understand the Capitol citizens and that there's more to them than we originally thought. Katniss's strength and willingness to see the good in her prep team opens her mind to being more empathetic for other Capitol citizens or sympathizers in Mockingjay. Speaking of Mockingjay, the third book is where the prep team really get their chance to highlight the themes of the series. In the movies, it's Effie that is rescued by the rebellion to prepare Katniss for the propose. However, in the books, it's Octavia, Flavius, and Vyncke. After Katniss has agreed to be the Mockingjay and is given Cinna's sketchbook of her suit, Plutarch actually takes her down to level 39 of District 13. In a guarded room, half naked, bruised, and shackled to the wall, Katniss sees her prep team for the first time since her interview with Caesar. Katniss demands to know why they're being treated like criminals, and Vyncke explains that they had simply taken a slice of bread because they were hungry. Plutarch and Gale question the guard about the extreme punishment, but he repeats that they were warned and still stole the bread. Simple as that. Katniss notices that Octavia has raw sores on her wrists from the shackles and orders the guards to free them. But it isn't until Plutarch claims that he needs them for special defense and that he'd take responsibility that the guard does so. Katniss, Plutarch, and Gale have to help the prep team walk to the hospital ward as their bodies had been cramped in unnatural positions for so long that they struggled to walk by themselves. On the way out, Flavius's foot actually catches on a drain, and Katniss dreads to think of why the room would need one in the first place. This is the first real instance that alerts Katniss to the uneasy wrongness in how District 13 operates. While waiting outside the hospital room, she questions Plutarch and Fulvia Cardew, his assistant, about how President Alma Coin treats people she doesn't like. She tells them that her prep team are simply just an example, not only to her, but to anyone that Coin might feel threatened by, Capitol or District. They respond to her by saying that they're too important to the rebellion, too necessary for them to be at risk, to which Katniss replies, "Of course you are. The tributes were necessary to the games too, until they weren't. And then we were very disposable, right, Plutarch?" Not even 5 chapters in, and Collins has you second-guessing the intentions behind the rebellion. Until this point, we know very little about District 13. We know that the Capitol struck a deal with 13 that essentially allowed them to play dead. We know that 3 days after the bombing of District 12, they rescued all the survivors. We know everyone was given a place to live, 3 meals a day, and identical clothing. All the refugees were granted automatic citizenship, all the children were being educated, and anyone over the age of 14 was given an entry military rank. All of this, at first glance, appears to be something that the good side would do. But with this new information about how District 13 punishes their rule breakers, this generosity appears to be more of a double-edged sword than anything else. In Chapter 1 of Mockingjay, Katniss learns from a District 10 refugee that there had been a bad pox outbreak in 13 and many people were died or even left infertile. And he tells her this, that it's likely the reason they were taken into 13. They need the numbers for the rebellion and repopulation. Katniss concludes that he's likely right, but given that her people are being treated humanely, it doesn't really raise any suspicions in her yet. The seed is planted, but Collins is great at diverting our attention away from the lurking darkness of the rebellion's government. She focuses on what Katniss would be focused on: her grief for her people and her anger towards everyone around her, including herself. Until she sees the state of her prep team, Katniss has found a little amusement in watching the Capitol rebels flounder to follow the strict rules. But her prep team is the wake-up call that she and the reader needed to see the underlying intentions. A large part of Mockingjay is Katniss understanding the nuances of people and of war. There are innocent people from the capital that become monsters in the eyes of the district and suffer the actions of war. And there are people in the districts that, in their desperate fight for freedom, end up subjecting people to the horrors they themselves are trying to escape. After leaving the hospital, Katniss and Gale go hunting in the woods above District 13. While relaxing by a pond, Gale asks Katniss why she cares so much for her prep team. This begins an argument between them, with Katniss defending them, saying that she knows them and they didn't know any better, while Gale says that they should have been aware and they spent the last year prettying her up for slaughter. Katniss understands why Gale feels this way and even questions herself about her defense of them, but she ends up telling Gale this: "I guess I'm defending anyone who's treated like that for taking a slice of bread. Maybe it reminds me too much of what happened to you over a turkey." For context, in Catching Fire, Cray, the head peacekeeper of District 12 that Katniss and Gale usually sell their game to, is replaced. Gale attempts to sell a turkey to the new head peacekeeper and ends up being whipped for it. Katniss, while trying to protect him, also got whipped across the face. Katniss brings up this comparison not just to end the conversation because she's uncomfortable, but because she can't think of another way to get through to Gale, to get him to understand. In her mind, her prep team and Gale both did something that they weren't supposed to and ended up receiving extreme punishments for it. It's an awkward and clunky comparison, and even she admits herself that her care for the prep team is a bit strange. But it's this line of thinking that highlights the fundamental difference between her and Gale. It also works really well in showing that the Capitol and District 13 aren't as different as they might first appear. If we circle back to Katniss's ignorance of Gale's growing anger across the series, we can find some interesting ties to his development in Mockingjay to District 13 until this point of the series. The only offense to the narrative that Gale has committed is being in love with Katniss, and being angry at her circumstances. Both of these are minor and extremely understandable things. But in Mockingjay, we really get to see his character get development for the first time, as this is the first time in the series he hasn't been left in District 12 while the plot goes on without him. Before the prep team reveal in Chapter 3, Gale had only really made one comment about the Capitol. "If I could hit a button and kill every living soul working for the Capitol, I would do it, without hesitation. The question is, what are you going to do?" Now, you've got to understand some context when he says this. When the bombing started in 12, after the end of Catching Fire, Gale was pretty much the only reason people survived. He was guiding people towards the meadow for safety. He formed a team to tear down the fence. He taught a group of people how to hunt during 3 days when there was hundreds of mouths to feed. This boy, no older than 19 years old, watched his home burn to the ground and holds the guilt of everyone he couldn't save. So when he says this, he means it. And who are we to hold it against him as readers? His feelings are extremely understandable, but does that make them right? Good. Justified. If he were to actually do that, if he were to actually kill every person working for the Capitol with just the push of a button, he would be no different than Snow. And I know that might be a controversial take, but he's including avoxes when he says this. People that have had their tongues cut out and are made into slaves, essentially, because they committed crimes. He's including the people of District 2 that produce their peacekeepers and make their weapons and have the strongest tie to the capital. He's including victors like Beatty who are forced to design and build inventions for the capital. He's also including the innocent capital children that were raised to believe and accept things about the districts without question. How is his push of a button any more justified than Snow's current execution of power? Although if you were to explain this to him, he would probably give some pause, we know that it ultimately doesn't matter because it's his bomb design, a delayed second bomb that lures in more victims like one of his snares that kills Prim and so many other innocent people, both capital and district. Good and evil can be found anywhere, and people are far more complex than we think. Collins doesn't pull any punches when she's trying to hammer this point home. If we take another look at Gale's whipping and catching fire, we can see this theme on full display. While in the Hob, District 12's black market, Katniss interacts with two distinctive peacekeepers, Cray, the head peacekeeper that I mentioned before, and Darius, a younger man that Katniss offhandedly says is probably one of her favorites if she had to pick. She banters with the two of them the day before she leaves for the victory tour, and when she's returned to District 12, Katniss and Peter are walking through the town square, and she sees Gale being whipped. Katniss recognizes the head peacekeeper uniform, but not the man in it, and after she's injured from intervening, and Haymitch appears to stop the man from continuing his abuse, Katniss notices Haymitch trip over a peacekeeper lying on the ground with a purpled face, and she recognizes that man as Darius. And she realizes that Darius, more than likely, tried to help Gale well before she did. Later we learn that Darius was turned into an Avox, and specifically placed in District 12 tribute quarters. I actually hate how much was cut from the movies, but I'll get into that in part 4. By including these scenes, humanizing the peacekeepers and the prep team, Collins challenges the notion that anyone working for the Capitol is automatically evil or just as bad. And in real life, someone's job doesn't equate to their moral values. Well, not unless their job is like dictator or torturer or something like that. The point Collins is trying to make through Darius and the prep team is that those without power are subjected to live under the conditions created by those in power. Regardless of how privileged or high status or safe you may be, there will always be a threat of who's next. Evil doesn't discriminate. It looks for threats to its power wherever it could be and destroys it. I think one of the underrated parts of the Hunger Games series is the villains. A good villain can make or break a story. They need to be enough of a threat that it pushes the hero into action while also being entertaining. The villains for YA dystopian fiction are often authorities. The reason for this is quite simple. Dystopian fiction is often inspired by real-world totalitarian systems. Totalitarianism is defined as a system of governance that has complete and unquestionable control over its citizens. Like I mentioned earlier, the authors of these stories have looked at the world around them and are sharing their observations through an exaggerated lens. Dystopian fiction is always political, and unfortunately, human beings have a long history of corrupt and violent politics that serves as great inspiration for many writers, including Suzanne Collins. So it's safe to say that the true villain or antagonist of any dystopian story, YA or classic adult, is not a singular character, but an entire world view. Usually the system of control or governance as a whole will be the wrong that needs righting. However, there can also be a character or characters that represent that system. That character is the face of the antagonist, the representative for the opposing force that the hero has to go against. Think Agent Smith from The Matrix. These characters make actions on behalf of or for the protection of the system they represent. It's the characters that work to uphold the system, or perhaps even invented it themselves, that make for engaging and compelling villains. They are physical representations of the story's themes. In The Hunger Games, President Snow is the overarching antagonist, but he's not necessarily the villain. The system is. In the first book, Katniss isn't fighting to end the games or take down the system. She's fighting Cato and the other tributes in just trying to get home to her family. It's along the way that she realizes that the enemy she has to face, whether she wants to or not, is the system at large. The governing powers that enforce starvation and violence to maintain control. If Snow really was the big bad of the series, then Katniss would not have killed Coin at the end before she could take over. Mockingjay is all about Katniss coming to this realization. Even though she's supposedly safe in 13, her freedoms are still restricted. She's still being controlled. The system hasn't really changed, it just has a new representative. That being said, individual characters that represent the system hold a lot of nuance and interest themselves. Coin and Snow are incredibly complex characters that are worth examining as parallels and how they represent totalitarianism. Looking across the series, we get a better understanding of Coin and Snow and how they parallel each other. They both present themselves publicly as wanting to protect their people and use actions they deem necessary to do so. But under the surface, they both desire power and a life free from the struggles they've had to endure, and they are willing to do what they believe they need to achieve that goal. Across Mockingjay, Coin, being the president of 13, has final say on the decisions regarding the war. Now, being limited to Katniss's perspective makes it a challenge to see how she operates with people outside of Katniss's role. But we do have examples of her being calculating and accommodating at the same time. One being when Katniss is detailing her conditions for being the Mockingjay to the rebellion. Of all the conditions, Coin's first and only objection is to the pardoning of Peter along with the other captured victors after the war. This scene comes after Peter's first hostage interview with Caesar Flickman, where he encouraged the rebels to give up. Katniss stands her ground on the condition and then holds her attention on Coin specifically. I can see her tallying the cost of my ultimatum, weighing it against my possible worth. Coin is a character with near endless patience. It took 1375 years to join the rebellion and help other districts, and she knows she'll have to play her cards right to see victory. Although it has been hinted at in Sunrise on the Reaping that the rebellion had been building for years, we don't know how long 13 had been a part of it. Plutarch is the only character that would be able to actually give us insight into that. However, he does tell Haymitch in Sunrise that the rebellion needed someone just like him, saying, luckier or with better timing. Having an army at their back wouldn't hurt. This gives us some indication on how involved District 13 was in the rebellion at the time of the 50th games. Throughout Mockingjay, Katniss, and the reader, is able to get a closer look at the system of power and how it works. Although District 13 is presented to be different from the capital, we know, as previously discussed, that the rules and restrictions, along with how they're enforced, are not that dissimilar. People are given jobs with little opportunity to select or change them. Although we know little about the education system in 13, we do know that Katniss and Gale have nuclear history class, meaning that just like in District 12 and the other districts, they have to learn about the trade of their district. The punishments for the crimes are extreme in both systems, as we know from Gale's turkey and the prep team's bread. I know these points are a bit cherry-picky, but I do think they present some good evidence for the comparison that Collins was trying to make. The system of power and their representatives are integral to the messaging and themes of the overarching story. District 13 and the capital are parallels in the same way that Coin and Snow are parallels. While researching this video, I found many instances in the text of Coin that, upon further contemplation, presents her character to be more and more like Snow. When Coin is first introduced for the reader, Katniss mentions two things about her physical appearance that sticks out to her. Her hair
What's your name, POB, so they calling you Bob?
and her eyes. Katniss describes Coin's hair as a grey shoulder-length sheet, and Katniss uses the word uniform specifically when talking about the lack of flaws or split ends in her hair. This minor description of Coin tells us that she places value on her presentation. The resources in 13 are limited, and as president, Coin has to maintain appearances. Her clear-cut decisiveness is carried through all she does, her hair being no exception. The description of Coin's eyes is also something that gives us clues into her character. Katniss describes Coin as having pale grey eyes that are noticeably different from the grey eyes she's used to seeing in the Seam of 12, as if all the colour had been sucked out of them, the colour of slush that you wish would melt away. It's not difficult to see that Coin being immediately associated with the colour grey is to not so subtly convey her being a morally grey character. But the specific words that Katniss uses when describing Coin's eyes is another subtle clue that I think packs more of a punch. Slush is watery, partially melted snow. Now, if that's not enough of a parallel for you, I have one more. When it comes to her name, I'd say most people already know that Coin is likely in reference to the phrase two sides of the same coin, but I think her first name has some more interesting connections to her character. The name Alma has a few different origins and meanings, but there is one that I think is more damning than the others. The Latin origin of Alma is almus, meaning nourishing or kind. Now there's 2 points of focus in that sentence. First being that across the Hunger Games series, characters with names of Latin origin are typically associated with being from the capital or just being associated with the capital, something I'll go into more depth on in part 2. Coin's first name falling into the same naming conventions as Snow is likely intentional and meant to clue the reader to the fact that they are similar characters earlier on in the story. And second, her name meaning nourishing or kind, when considered with her last name of Coin, sheds some light on how she can be perceived. Two sides of the same coin, kindness, 2 ways to look at it. Alma Coin does a lot for her district. That fact is undeniable, but that help can be viewed a few different ways. She is the president of her district. It is her job to take care or nourish, if we are being on the nose, her people. Did she become president because she genuinely wants to help people and take care of her people, or did she do so out of revenge and retribution? Was her desire for power always there, or did it develop over time? These are questions that I think the readers were encouraged to ask themselves as they made their way through the novel. Coin and Snow are fascinating characters, as at first glance they seem to have opposing ideals, but upon another glance, their actions give away their roles in the narrative. They are villains that believe themselves to be the heroes. Both systems utilize the idea of unity and division, creating narratives that will inspire people to either join their fight or keep the so-called peace. For Coin and 13, the unifying factor is hatred for the capital and mutual oppression among the districts. Having a common enemy and a vision for the future creates unity among the rebels and mistrust in the capital system. 13 uses hatred to further separate the districts of the rebellion from the capital. Likewise for the capital, the unifying factor is the fear of unnecessary death and the protection that the capital provides the districts. The weaponization of Panem's history has allowed the capital to tell and retell the events of the Dark Days. It's saying, look at what happened last time we went to war. Look at how we almost destroyed ourselves. Do you really want to have that happen again? Fear is also the method of enforcing division among the districts. The fear of a failed rebellion is more than enough for some people to pledge allegiance to the capital, such is the case for District 2. In accordance to the capital propaganda, all peacekeepers come from the capital. But in Mockingjay, we find out that most of them are actually from District 2. And in turn, they have the strongest loyalty to the capital, and likely have some of the strongest propaganda reinforcing the ideas of unity and division. The reason these systems come about and are maintained is because of the tragedies that predate them. The aftermath of a crisis, be that disease or terrorism or all-out war, leaves people vulnerable, and as we've seen in real human history, people can and do exploit that fact. The desire for change and fear of past events can be used to implement laws that can sometimes lead to conditions that are the same or even worse off conditions for the citizens. Despite not knowing much about it, the Dark Days greatly affected how the Capitol and 13 operate. We know that Panem was once likely a democratic society, given that Snow was elected into his presidency, but he has somehow managed to maintain that position for far longer than would be assumed, and thus the totalitarian system emerged. But how? Surely other aspiring Capitolites would have run against him in his re-election campaigns, and it's only because of the lovely Finnick Odair that we know there were others. Political threats and allies alike that Snow poisoned to keep his crown. And that is precisely what the presidency became, a crown. The facade of democracy is just that, a facade. The system of Panem is totalitarian, and so is District 13. Or at the very least, that's what Coin was hoping 13 could become. Her rise to power is unknown, but her decision to position herself as interim president after the war was her goal all along. She wanted to remain in that center of control, that head of power, with the only difference in her job being the scale of control. Her choice to introduce a symbolic Hunger Games as a means to satisfy the victims is a good example of her stepping into totalitarianism. By asking the living victors to vote, Coin is effectively ensuring she won't be the only one, the sole perpetrator of the new system. Totalitarianism works because it manipulates people and their fears and desperation for change and provides them with something that only appears to be what they want and need, ultimately for it to be seen for what it is: increased control. The true villain of the Hunger Games is not Snow or Coin, but the violent panoptic system of governance that allows for unrequited control, and the horrifying nature of how easy it is to get there. Suzanne Collins is a very smart writer. The Hunger Games is a frighteningly good example of the world around us. The villains aren't stereotypical evildoers that are wringing their hands with little cackles. They are genuinely fleshed out people that act in accordance with their own desires. Coin and Snow could be hiding among any government in the world right now, just waiting for their opportunity. It's happened before. Germany, Russia, North Korea. It can happen at any time, anywhere. And it's important for young readers and people of all ages, really, to have an understanding of how easy it is for a nation to fall into dystopia. YA dystopias thus function not as escapist fantasies, but as effective rehearsals for civic engagement, equipping readers with frameworks to recognize corruption, resist domination, and reimagine the future as a contested terrain of possibilities. Characters like Coin and Snow are meant to show readers what they should look out for, and that ignorance is not an option, because someday you might wake up and realize that the world around you has changed. My microphone died, and I didn't realize until I was editing this months after. The Hunger Games is far more than just an entertaining story for teenagers. It's a harsh and honest reflection of how easily we can let our biases influence how we think of people and the world around us. In an interview with David Leviathan after the release of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Collins explains that she writes when she has something she wants to explore. The debate of the natural state of human nature, of good versus evil, nature versus nurture, of compassion versus control, is not a mistake. The curtains are not just blue. It actually is that deep, and if anyone wants to claim otherwise, saying that these books are just for kids, I would ask them to think more deeply about why they are so dismissive of them in the first place. Collins has written a deeply rich story that explores complex themes with a respect the YA genre doesn't often seem to receive. And no matter what your opinions on these books are, you cannot say it has no depth. We've reached the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around until the end. I know it was a pretty long one, so I really appreciate it. If you liked listening to me yap on about the Hunger Games, consider liking and subscribing because I have 3 more videos in the works. They're coming out soon, fingers crossed. If you have any info you'd like to share about the Hunger Games or comments about the video, please drop a comment below. I would really appreciate that. I hope you all have a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.